Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to what is going to be one of the final sessions of the UNEP Global Roundtable, which focuses on making investments in sustainable land use more accessible. My name is Ivo Mulder. I lead the Climate Finance Unit within UNEP, which is known for having set up a number of blended finance vehicles, such as the Agri-Free Fund with Rabobank and Mirova Natural Capital, the Tropical Landscape Finance Facility with BNP Paribas, and other initiatives that are really focusing on unlocking public and especially private finance for sustainable land use, making sure that the food that we going to eat to feed more mouths in the future is going to be done with less impact on ecosystems than what we're seeing to date. The topic of today is to see with the panel how we can make investments into sustainable land use more accessible. And I'm pleased to be joined with a very interesting and diverse panel, which includes Moritz van Unge from Sylvester Climate Associates, and who's an independent advisor to the Luxembourg government, Hernan Coleman from the Central Bank of Paraguay, Amaury Oliva from the Brazilian Banking Federation, FEBRABAN, and Edith Kiss of Mirova Natural Capital. I would also like to ask those attending to put their questions in the chat box so that we can try and pick this up as much as we can. But before doing so, I would like to ask first a question to the panelists. Can you explain from your own institution's perspective what you're doing to make investments in sustainable land use more accessible? Starting with you, Moritz.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, Ivo and everyone else. First let me quickly thank you and your team and UNEP Finance for having me on the panel. It's a huge honor, and to be with all the other panelists here. Thank you also. I wanted to commend you for your hard work. As you mentioned, what UNEP is doing and demonstrating every day. That actually the very meaning of nature-based solutions and how to finance a resilient future. So as you said, I'm an independent, so I'm not the government of Luxembourg myself. I'm rather an independent consultant of the government. I have and legal counsel. I have had the honor of for a number of years now of participating in some of the strategic discussions around climate finance and setting up the climate finance portfolio for the government, and obviously thinking more about how to bring in the land sector in these discussions. For your background, Luxembourg, which is a country of less than 600,000 inhabitants, they have been committing over the years to quite considerable amounts of climate finance. 120 million for the period up to 2020, and now up to 2025. This will considerably increase to 200 million. Which is always on top of 1% aid and development. So there's this is not, these are not fascinating numbers, but there's some clear commitment for climate change. Land use is an important piece. Luxembourg also wishes to connect, given its role as an international center for finance and increasingly for sustainable finance, to help use public finance to help bridge the world of finance with what's needed on the ground. So a couple of flagship initiatives that they've been doing is there's of interest for everyone who is listening in, probably the platform that they created with the European Investment Bank, which seeks to actually it's wide ranging and not just land use, but land use is an important part. and they are trying to help create an atmosphere for sustainable, for innovative finance mechanisms in that sector, including in agroforestry. There's the climate finance. There's the Luxembourg International Climate Finance Accelerator, or ICFA, which has become, at least in Europe, some form of household name for what we are discussing today: investments in sustainable investments in land use. And it's quite an interesting knowledge platform too, because one of the key challenges, and we're going to get into those challenges over the next 30 minutes or so, is obviously that there's a knowledge gap, like that there's a lot of willingness by funders to do something, and there's also capital, but there's somehow like the whole impact framework needs to be built. So that's what they are doing. There's the Forestry and Climate Change Fund, which tries to focus on secondary degraded tropical forests. There's the Blue Natural Capital Facility, which seeks to identify and help projects to help develop different income streams for projects in the area of coastal wetlands. And then there's, of course, the important work of UNEP. Luxembourg is co-funding the land use finance program, as well as the Restoration Seed Capital Facility. Both super important initiatives. Ivo, I can't hear you. I hope I'm not.
Okay, just double checking. Can you hear me now? You can hear me now? Okay, great. I think it's great to see that Luxembourg, as a relatively small country, is spending more than 1% of its annual budget on development aid, and with investments in sustainable land use being a big pillar. Let's hear from Hernan on the other side of the globe, what your perspective is, Hernan, from how investments in sustainable land use can be made more accessible. In 2 minutes, please. You just need to unmute yourself.
I know, Abel, could you help me?
Yeah, you are unmuted at the moment, so you should be fine. No, now you're muted. Just click again. Yeah, it's a bit confusing, but feel free to go ahead, Hernan. All right, let's hear from Amaury first then. Amaury, from the Brazilian Banking Federation, FEBRABAN. Deforestation linked to the Amazon and to the Cerrado is obviously a lot in the news. From your perspective, what are you doing from FEBRABAN to help accelerate the drive to sustainable land use?
Thank you, Ivo. Good morning or good afternoon, depends on how you are. And first of all, I'd like to greet my colleagues from this panel, and also thank UNEP FI for the kind invitation that was made to FEBRABAN. Well, most of FEBRABAN's support on accelerating the investment on sustainable land use in Brazil is through capacity building to and together with our associated banks. For more than 5 years now, we have had a specific working group with around 30 participants from 12 banks that focus on the discussion on land use risks and opportunities in Brazil. The group is very active and specialized at the processes of financing rural credit operations and managing social environmental risks. It brings first-hand examples and challenges they face at the field to be part of the discussions and to collectively find solutions for the sector. For example, one of the deliverables of the collaboration on the working group was a publishing of 2 studies of FEBRABAN with FGV. It's a reference is University and Research Center in Brazil. The study is called Funding for Forest Restoration and Deforestation Risk Management. They are both available at our website for public access. Another capacity building strategy that we supported the banks to perform was to know and analyze available tools and databases in the market to assist the decision making and, of course, operation of banks, so social and environmental risks. From those experiences, we understood that offering knowledge and access to information allows the banks to have more conscious and assertive decisions on taking or not certain risks and or going or not for that opportunity, and making them more confident to explore more the sustainable alternatives for credit operation or for an investment. They need to be secure that their database and tools being used will avoid them from making any unnecessary risk for the institution or for the environment. So traditional training is also an important part of this capacity building, a strategy of FEBRABAN. In last year, we host 4 in-person courses for 160 people on the topics of sustainability, general concepts, best practice on social environmental risk management and opportunities, and also at the TCFD recommendations. Now in this year, we're preparing the launch of 8 online courses with the content we had last year. This year, we have also offered 4 modules of training on sectorized TCFD risks and opportunities on energy, agriculture, and mining as part of our TCFD roadmap for implementing the recommendations on the Brazilian financial sector. And another important deliverable of our TCFD roadmap for agricultural sector is the construction of tropicalized scenarios for transactional and physical risks that will allow the banks to examine their portfolio on more specific and customized data for the context and granularity needed for climate risks in Brazil. Finally, together with UNEP-FI, a Good Growth Partnership project, we will also offer in the next 2 months a series of training on deforestation risk management. The goal is to provide participants with fundamental concepts about the management of deforestation risks and opportunities, while understand the Brazilian context, the impacts for the productive and financial sector, how to mitigate risks, and how to take advantage of opportunities. The expectation is that the participants reflect the concepts covered and apply them in their professional activities. For that, we're challenging the banks to involve more professional working in the commercial, products, agribusiness, and social environmental risks analysis and credit areas. We had a specific concern to bring this opportunity.
Can I interrupt you, because I think there is a lot of information already. If you allow me, Amaury, I think this is a very good introduction. I will come back to you in a minute. I would also like to say to the attendees that we can actually see the chat function, and that already questions are coming in, which I will relay back to the speakers in a minute. But please do make sure that you type your questions, because I do see them in the chat box and I will be asking them to the speakers. So before going to Edith, just want to double check with Hernan if he can hear me and wants to give his perspective from the Central Bank of Paraguay, how this institution is helping to make investments in to sustainable land use more accessible. So over to you, Hernan.
Thank you, Ivo. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Apologies for the inconvenience. Yes. Thanks for the invitation to the Central Bank of Paraguay to be part of the panel. Yeah, well, economic and financial systems were designed and optimized for scenarios with lower climate risk. So increasing climate hazard may mean that systems are vulnerable. So it's truly clear for Central Bank of Paraguay that climate-related risk may again be a sort of potential material financial risk that can impact both firms, all sectors, and the stability of the financial system as a whole. So there is a call for action to make contribution in any possible way and by any available means. So in that sense, on the risk-based approach for central bank financial, micro and macro prudential regulation is one of the most valuable tools on hand in driving the integration of sustainability consideration into corporate and financial practice. But we must bear in mind that regulation needs to be timely, risk-sensitive, evidence-based, and proportional. So 8 years ago, 4 pioneer private banks launched the Roundtable for Sustainable Finance, and it was working very well because with the help from international funding partners and correspondent banking, they were resembling global best practices. So in a self-regulated fashion, they issued their own guidelines for financing livestock in 2016, agricultural sector in 2017, and for the agro-industrial sector in 2018. The central bank followed those developments, and when we considered that the time was right because there was a need just for level playing field among institutions, and that certain level of understanding and capacity building was already developed and available in the domestic industry, the central bank issued the guidelines for managing environmental and social risks. This guideline was issued in November 2018, with the end of December 2019 as a deadline for a full-fledged implementation of environmental and social risk management systems. So this guideline promotes identification, measurement, mitigation, and monitoring of those risks in business activities. Ideally, the pricing of financial products and services should become more risk sensitive and truly reflecting inherent risks and the cost of mitigating measure. So we also hope that capital allocation will move from more risky to less risky investment. And also, the right implementation may allow banks to identify environmental and social opportunities in business activity. As you mentioned before, those projects and initiatives that deliver positive impacts and are profitable. So at the same time, they make economic sense. So, and also, final guidelines incorporate provision for banks to put in place, as any other corporation, proper internal measure for deploying eco-friendly day-to-day operations.
Good. I'll come back to you in a minute, also Hernan. I already see questions from Lucian and Indira. But before doing so, also like to welcome Edith Kiss from Merova Natural Capital, who's been a pioneer in the field of sustainable land use finance. So Edith, in a way, a very easy question for you in to what extent Merova Natural Capital or Authedia previously was contributing to helping accelerate and making investments into sustainable land use more accessible. So very quick introduction from your side, and then we'll move to the more specific questions. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah, I hear you now. No, you need to check again. I just heard you, I think. Yeah, I hear you now. I heard you just a second ago, Edith. Okay, so as we're waiting for Edith to come back, would already like to put a question to Amaury from Indira, who's asking, how did you communicate the risk of environmental social risk to the banks that you're working with, and how do the banks measure that type of risk at the moment? So question from Indira to you, Amaury, and then afterwards we go back to Edith, who's hopefully able to hear me and intervene again. Okay, great. So Amaury, do you quickly want to answer that question, and then we'll move to Edith?
Yes, as I mentioned, we have the capacity building programs and also a few studies. We believe they offer knowledge and access to information, and this all allows the banks to have a more conscious and assertive decisions, or taking on all certain risks or going or not through some opportunities. We believe they can help also the banks.
Thanks for that. We do seem to have an issue just over the last 10 seconds, Amaury, with your speaking. In the meantime, I do hope that Edith is able to hear me and is able to relay her perspective on how sustainable land use investments is being perceived by Merova Natural Capital.
Yes, thanks a lot, Ivo. Sorry about that. Something that the platform is not letting us, I think, unmute, but hopefully it's all good now. So very pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot for UNEP-FI for the invitation to joining this very interesting panel. So on our side, Merova Natural Capital is an impact investment asset manager in the natural capital space, and we have started off in 2013. And really our mission back then was to catalyze the transition to sustainable land use. That was our mission, to see how we can do that and how we can finance disruptive models that can create some traction And thanks to some forward-looking investors, I would say back then, such as EIB, FMO, BNP, AXA, others, who joined our first fund, a 100 million euro Althelia Climate Fund, we really had the ability to start financing innovative models on the ground that can scale and that can, again, disrupt the current business as usual, which is unfortunately the unsustainable land use practices. And what this mandate that they have given us was able to do is that we could provide really a long-term price signal on ecosystem services, notably on carbon, which was missing on the market. And 8 year, we have an 8 year, our first fund was an 8 year closed-ended fund. On carbon markets, 8 years is a really long-term horizon. On agroforestry or trees, I know it's not that long. Actually, we're seeing that very clearly now as exiting the portfolio. But on carbon, it made a real big difference because other projects that try to live on a very thin carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets, and living really from year to year based on the sales they can make, this really allowed our partners on the ground to design holistic landscape approaches and they could really implement activities that make sense in the long term and that can catalyze the transformation. And the idea was that we use carbon as a basis revenue with carbon collateralized loans, and then implement activities that make sense for the landscape that over time overtake carbon, and hopefully we can actually scale back completely carbon, because we really view it as a transition tool. It's not the end game to create carbon credits. It's a really interesting complement what we see in this protection production approach to help the transition, help smooth out the J curve, and we now have 6-7 years of experience from our first fund, so it's very interesting to see. And that's what we have 7 funds actually under asset management. We managed to replicate that also in seascapes, the blue economy, and then other, as you mentioned, also the Agri3 and other different strategies. So yeah, we're trying to now bring that to the market, offer solutions to our investors so that they can start investing in this new emerging market. Thank you.
So it would be great when I go back to Hernan and Amaury to see how they would view a pioneering venture like Mirova Natural Capital and the applicability that it can have in the Brazilian context and the Paraguayan context. But before doing so, I have a question from Sibylle Riedmiller, who's basically saying by definition, the most sustainable use of land is protected areas, which may not be possible everywhere, but she's basically saying we need a stronger engagement from the private sector in conservation. So in giving perhaps 1 or 2 examples from your company, Edith, can you also weave in this question from Sibylle in how the private sector can be more involved in direct conservation, basically, whether it's through carbon or other means?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and thanks a lot for that. We do have seen actually with the COVID crisis as well that a lot of the budgets of protected areas have even get thinner. So I think it's a very important aspect, and we certainly actually have been very, I think, successful in Peru. We have a heavy portfolio in Peru from our first fund. With the protection production approach I mentioned, they are all around national protected areas, and I think it's highly replicable and scalable. But that definitely necessitates a strong carbon price signal. And I would say that we have been working on this. We even launched in 2016 a marketing company because we did see that the market was not coming, and we actually catalyzed the largest private portfolio of forest carbon credits, more than 30 million tons. So we were very much deep in the game, and so we were pushing this, what is called today NCS, Natural Climate Solutions carbon markets, for a couple of years. And even with a quite weak price signal, like $5, we have seen a tremendous transformation that can take place. So imagine if the price is 20 or like a serious price, which economists say it should be. There is a real important role for private sector to play in the buffer zone, how you can actually, from our project our very first project in Peru, Tambopata, we have created from scratch and not a zero deforestation, but a forest positive cacao supply chain. And that's something very interesting because you can use these agricultural, agro-produce, sustainable agri-produce as actually a protection element for the park. That works in buffer areas. Mosaic landscapes are a bit different, but we also have managed to do in Guatemala. So I think there is a lot of potential, and it's highly, highly scalable. The market is coming, it's there, the price signal is getting there. We don't have yet a full transparency. We don't have a stable price index. Once there will be an index on which we can do more structured transactions, I think the market can really replicate these models. And then I would just say, maybe for the scaling question, that the next big thing to watch is how we scale projects to jurisdictions. There's a lot of buzz around, obviously, jurisdictional REDD+ or jurisdictional carbon. And I think there are some countries, some jurisdictions that are getting ripe to that. So we're very keen to trial out with our next generation funds the second generation carbon projects, carbon jurisdictions. And we do see good potential. I mean, in Brazil, we also tried. Unfortunately, maybe we were a bit too early in Mato Grosso, but we do still see a lot of potential for these large-scale carbon projects.
Thanks for that, Edith. Maybe in the final remarks, when we move from, say, niche to mainstreaming, you can give some insights on how you think investments in a landscape, which to me still sound very challenging and slightly... from a private finance perspective, not easy to implement. So it would be good to hear your thoughts. Turning back to you, Amaury, I think the capacity building with your members is great. Also the training on deforestation risk. I mean, obviously, Brazil at the moment, also in the news, is facing a lot of challenges in relation to deforestation in the Cerrado due to soy and cattle. How are you working with your members, or are there some examples from your members that you would want to highlight how this can be turned around, and what is it that Febraban is proposing to its members?
Well, thank you for the question, Ivo. A relevant example to mention is the recent announcement for 3 of the largest private banks in Brazil, Bradesco, Itaú, and Santander, of the plan for the Amazon. The boldness of the partnership and also the 10 goals proposed are a clear statement of the sector's commitment to innovation and the practical action of its sustainability strategies to the country's sustainable development. Through this plan, they aim to finance sustainable projects and offer economic alternatives to those in the region by choosing production chains in which Brazil can clearly stand out. We understand that recognizing that the Amazon has a central role in our competitive advantage and contributing to its preservation is a commitment to guarantee the expansion of our economy. Also at the Amazon topic, Febraban also conducted a survey last August to find out what Brazilians think about the region. It's also available in Portuguese and English in our website. And what we found out is that the Brazilian population is concerned with the preservation of the environment and highly aware of its importance for the country. For example, 78% of respondents said they were little or not satisfied with the efforts to preserve the environment in the country, and about 83% of the Brazilians defend, for example, the strengthening of measures against illegal deforestation. Before I conclude, I also wanted to highlight that the Central Bank of Brazil recently announced a sustainability agenda to be implemented in the next months, including a MOU with a Climate Bonds Initiative and a partnership with NGFS. There will certainly be extra features to support more and more green investments in the country, with special attention to agriculture and related sectors that leads the economy of Brazil. And also, Febraban will be supporting its associates banks on the implementation of the projects themselves and also the new guidelines of the regulator.
Thanks for that, Amaury. Turning to you, Hernan, I mean, Amaury finished his remarks by saying that there are 3 large Brazilian commercial banks who are making plans to finance production in the Amazon biome in a more sustainable way and putting in place MOUs with Climate Bonds Initiative and the Network for Greening the Financial System. From your perspective as a representative from the Paraguayan Central Bank, and also given the recent pledge by heads of state where more than 70 leaders were signing the Leaders Pledge for Nature, what is the potential in Paraguay for moving towards sustainable investments in land use, specifically in the cattle sector, and given the recent also media attention that the Gran Chaco has experienced.
Oh, thank you, Ivo. Well, actually, 80% of the financial assets are handled by the financial sector. So there's a lot of room for stock exchange and capital markets to work here in Paraguay. So nowadays, international funds can through or channeling through the banking sector. So there's a lot of room here for direct investment by funds. And also, four largest and domestically important institutions are part of the roundtable for sustainable banking. So they have been doing a great and tremendous job in building capacity and also signing, signing a memorandum of understanding with, the private and public sector, because, solution needs a multi-point entry approach. So environmental ministry, the authority, the forestry authority, the central bank, are also working with the roundtable for sustainable finance in order to increase control and the enforcement of regulation. Regarding regulation, what we have by law is that you need to have environmental impact assessment. You need a prior approval from the Ministry of Environment. But from the compliance side, we need to work all together, because that's the only way we can guarantee that all the projects, are environmental friendly. And as you mentioned, biodiversity and natural habitat is extremely relevant in Paraguay, because many bird species and unique species, and also we have local indigenous communities living in ground part of that area. So we need to find the proper way, to improve and make the financial system more competitiveness in terms of eco-friendly system. So I think the Central Bank of Paraguay is a unique position, in all those national committees, when it is a part of those acting member. So, to make the case and gather consensus for the proper time to get involved in environmental issues.
And just to probe you a little bit, Hernan, if you allow me, do you see that the solution is more around compliance and risk management to reduce credit to activities that are deemed illegal under Paraguayan law, or would you see this more as an approach where incentives need to be provided to cattle ranchers and others to produce in a more sustainable way by offering incentives to have more heads of cattle per hectare, for example, or build in biodiversity protections in loan agreements? I mean, how do you see that from your perspective? Is it more the carrot or the stick? It may be both, but is one more important than the other?
No, to be honest, from the 1960s to early 2000, growth was based on, intensive use of land. But since 2000, 2010, we have some new laws and regulation for protecting the environment. We also have a zero deforestation law, which was, extended to the end of the year. So regarding law, you can find out that mostly 90% of the deforestation decreased. So we are, the rate of deforestation decreased substantially. So I think we're going on in the right path. But there's still a 10%, that has to be enforced. And as I mentioned before, the guidelines issued by the central bank explicitly encourage that biodiversity should be protected. And as I mentioned also, if to obtain the credit or guarantees, is an unavoidable requirement to present the certification, the authorization of the Ministry of Environment, that you have presented the environmental impact assessment, and that you have a plan for environmental friendly use of the land.
Great, thanks for that. I mean, I was about to move to Moritz, who is probably coming back in again. I hope that Moritz can hear me. Moritz, are you there? Just double checking. Yeah, I think
I think I had the same Can you hear me now?
I can hear you perfectly.
I had the same problem as everyone else.
Yeah.
If you turn off the micro too long, you cannot turn it on again.
But we hear you now.
Anyways, I'm back. Yes.
Indeed. So I would like to turn also to you. So there was a question from Lucian, who was asking you what platform you were specifically referencing. I'm not sure if that was the ICFA or the EIB platform. So maybe in your answer you can weave that in. But the question that I have for you is, I mean, the Luxembourg government has been extremely proactive in trying to scale up private finance. I mean, what do you see as the key barriers? Also, listening to Hernan, Edith, and Amaury, and where do you see that more needs to be done? And in your answer, you can perhaps also weave into the question from Lucian on the platform, basically, and the information.
Yeah, thank you. Lucian, thank you also for the questions. I think all the platforms and facilities that I mentioned in my earlier, that I listed in the comment section, so you should find it there. Thank you for asking about that. On barriers, of course, this is a big question, but and a big issue. But what comes first to mind is that we obviously don't just need to talk about creating more incentive regimes, but looking at the rather poor status quo, that the wrong incentives are there, and that we rather have to talk about subsidies that need to shift from a sometimes appalling baseline, that the wrong kind of investment in land use is funded, to something that we focus on sustainable investment. That comes, of course, with a history. Everyone does what they've always been doing for many years and decades. So this is a long process. We certainly do have, like regulatory issues. We do have problems, and the earlier question, and creating more protection regimes, managing these, enforcing these, and involving more horizontal governance to local communities. Then obviously, it's like people still treat, and we all do, it's like ecosystem services as something for free and granted, and take what you get. So we need to think about that. When you do want to do this, and there's, I'm so glad that quite a few successful initiatives have been mentioned. You have to tackle all of these, and something that always also comes to mind is that there's now so much active thinking about this and so much willingness. So we have to provide the tools, also for the finance world to put their money at good use. So we need something. We need to transpire knowledge. We need to show them where to invest and create platforms to do so. If we have positive incentive regimes such as carbon, which was mentioned, and other, perfect. It's good, but we need, it's like we need more to think about this transformation away from the bad incentives to the good ones. Just, it's like as you're asking for examples, and you can shut me off when it's like I know we are running against the clock.
We have,
but I'm just working. I happen to work in wonderful projects at the moment in Colombia and beyond in Latin America on a waterfront creation. These are facilitated by the Nature Conservancy, and the other is on sustainable cattle farming, where they bring in corridors, biodiversity corridors. Intensification of land use for cattle farming increases the yields exponentially. Brings back soil carbon, all this, and it's so wonderful to see. It's like, and now it's just to put this into something where regulators take notice, where people on the ground take notice, and you have someone. And often you don't even need that much advanced capital to do it, but you have to, you have to bring this in, and this takes some time. But there's that's very encouraging to see.
Okay, that's I think it is actually interesting to see that on this panel we have a very diverse perspectives and types of institutions, including Hernan, for example, more from the regulatory perspective. So it would be good in his closing remarks to see what he feels can be done from the regulator's perspective. I see there's a challenging question for you, Amaury, from Hannah Heineken, basically saying that Brazilian banks are at the moment, to a large extent, financing operations that do lead to deforestation, fires, and human rights violations. It's more a comment than a question, with the statement change is long overdue. I'm not sure if there's any remark that you want to make to that statement, or if we can move to the closing.
Yeah, Ivo, very quickly. Of course, unfortunately, there are bad practices, but I want to look forward and highlight the good practices, and from the inside the banking sector in Brazil, I clearly see a lot of effort and a clear evolution. We're moving on.
Thanks for that. So we have about 9 minutes left. I would say to the attendees, and there are actually more than 30. What I see on the viewers, there are plenty more on the platform. Please do provide any questions, because we can perhaps also relate it to the panelists after the session is over. But I would like to move to, say, the closing statements from the panelists. I mean, the thing is that the challenge with moving from a fossil fuel-based economy to renewables, that took time, and it required incentives from governments, such as through feed-in tariffs and otherwise. When it comes to food and land use, there are, of course, lots and lots of disincentives that need to be tackled. And the question is, like, who's going to pay for it? Is it the farmer on the ground? Is it the consumer who buys a product in the supermarket, or any other company along the chain? My question to the panelists: what do we need to move from niche to mainstream? Again, looking from your own institution's perspective, what are you going to plan in the next 6 to 12 months? Starting with ADIT. So, M&T Mirova Natural Capital has now managed to have 7 funds under management. What are you going to do next in the next 6 to 12 months to scale it up? How are you going to stimulate others to follow in the footsteps of your company?
Thanks, Ivo. Well, that would merit, I think, an hour discussion of these questions. But I had a couple of points also on the discussion from the other panelists. So definitely for us, the next 6 to 12 months, we need to implement those new strategies. You know, the second generation funds are a bit different. We have been able to replicate with follow-on strategies. We have now blended vehicles, so it's very exciting. I think there is a clear evolution there. I would come back to what I mentioned, I think, on the price signal, and I think Colombia was mentioned as a country. So if you look at what's happening there, and with a simple tax, this $5 tax on fossil fuels, which allowed the local carbon credits, especially from the nature-based sector, how it catalyzed the market. So there is clear signal that there is success. You know, it can be a really catalytical role. Who pays for it? Well, if once you have a carbon price, the good thing is it can go through the value chain. Everybody pays for it a little bit, right? And interestingly, we do see now the finance sector stepping up and starting also green their portfolios, even through buying these carbon credits. So it's really exciting. I also wanted to reflect on the questions on the beef sector. We do have experience in Brazil with sustainable cattle, and it's not easy. We have been working there, and it's, you know, it has its challenges. And just one remark or lessons for us is that if there was a carbon, it's one of the projects where we haven't been able to so far monetize carbon. We're working on it now, especially there are some advancement with soil carbon as well, that we clearly see that those projects in our portfolio that didn't have carbon had struggled more, or it's a slower process. And again, just to the point that carbon can be a really nice complement to the sustainable land use transformation. So on our side, we'll for sure keep working on that, hoping that a better, clearer price signal will help scale. And then one more, just the last sentence on where we see also how to help the industry grow. If we really do see the next 12 months that we need to grow up the pipeline, investable pipeline. So we're trying to accelerate that and go a bit more upstream, take a bit more risk, and help push more dark green, deep green projects into investors' pipeline. Thank you.
Okay, so I've taken note of the pipeline issue. Just reading between the lines, are you saying that a more a higher or floor price for carbon is necessary to take it to the next step. Is that also what you're saying, to move to a slightly larger degree of interest from institutional investors?
Absolutely. If you have a stable carbon price, or you can transact millions of tons, which is already happening, but there is no transparency yet, there is no price index, no price benchmark, but there is interest. Right. And as soon as it's there, the market is growing, and it's still nascent. The infrastructure is not yet there everywhere. So as soon as that grows, you will see even more inflows of capital, and I think to the right direction. To your point, there is still a lot of obstacles or perverse subsidies, but at least now we see the good flow of the good direction as well.
Okay, that in combination with investments in getting good bankable projects in your pipeline as well. Hernan, moving to you. I mean, a central bank is uniquely placed to, as you said in your earlier remarks, create a level playing field. So what is the Central Bank of Paraguay planning in the next 6 to 12 months to sort of help advance this drive to further investments in sustainable cattle production and other forms of sustainable land use? So over to you in, I would say, 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let me stress again that the central bank is committed to deploy its institutional capabilities and to take all necessary regulatory or non-regulatory steps in order to enhance the competitiveness of the Paraguayan financial sector, promoting, green and social, sustainability-oriented financial investment. At this time, there is a need for rising awareness about climate change consequences, and that's from the society point of view, also public organization, national administrative and political authority. As already done in previous years, the central bank through the training institute will continue providing training opportunities of management on environmental and social risks to the public and the banking sector representatives. We're very happy that UNEP-FI expert will provide training for our supervisor who will be in overseeing the implementation of the risk management systems. And as you said, Paraguay, the Central Bank of Paraguay is either a member of Alliance for Financial Inclusion, Green Finance Group, World Bank Sustainable Banking Network. And recently, we have begun contact with the network of central banks and supervisor for greening the financial system. And we look forward to engaging in the work stream on green finance of this network. So that's the way we think we can promote discussion, reach consensus for full transition to a more inclusive and resilient economy, to use the resources in a responsible way, to implement the climate-related sustainable development goals, and ultimately, to build a brighter and robust future for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Hernan. In 1 minute, closing remarks from your side, Moritz. What do you feel? I mean, you've already touched upon some of the disincentives that need to be tackled, such as subsidies and the fact that there's no sort of silver bullet for this. But do you further want to build on that in 1 minute before we close this session? What do we need?
Look, at the end of the day, I'm a lawyer, and so I look into areas that I'm talking about, and I believe still in text and treaty. So my own vision is that we use that, like, the next 10 months or so that we have before the next COP as a breathing space, because if we think about scaling up action, we need some. It needs to go vertically and horizontally, and I think the NDC work is very important in that respect. So wherever there's still room to improve the vision for land use in NDCs, this is where we have to work over the next few months, and that gives incentives to hopefully to accelerate action over the next year. So that's from my side, my vision.
Okay, great, thanks. So I see that Amaury had to drop off, but I would like to thank the panelists for joining this session. I think we've all tried our best, despite some technical challenges, but I think we got good questions from the attendees. I heard from colleagues that there are still 3,000 people on the platform, so it's good to see that this topic is actually receiving the attention it deserves. I heard a lot of interesting remarks from the panelists. I'm not going to summarize everything in the 20 seconds that rest. I would say to those who are attending, do follow up with the speakers if you have specific questions for them. And with that, I would like to thank Hernan, Moritz, Edith, and also
Thank you.
Amaury for joining.
You too.
Over to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank-
Unipify.
Thank you.